Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Echo Wirm Live. Today we are doing our usual bi-weekly live stream where every other Thursday around this time in the afternoon or evening, wherever you're from, we go through your questions that you guys leave for me on either channel or on Patreon or Discord, just talking about the different properties that we cover on the different channels. So questions about Percy Jackson, questions about Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, all sorts of things. You guys are always welcome to ask those kinds of questions, whether it be just about when they're coming up on the channel or what's going on the channel, or just questions you maybe have about the characters or the storylines, or just things that you aren't quite sure about that you want answered by someone who maybe knows a little bit more about you or maybe studies these things a little bit more than you do. So I'm always happy to answer those kinds of questions. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat below. If we don't get to your questions for whatever reason, feel free to leave them not in the chat, but in the comments section down below, and we will get to them next week, or in 2 weeks, of course. So the next live stream that we're planning for will be September 26th around 4 to 5 Eastern in the afternoon. Look for that as it's coming up. But let's start with some pre-prepared questions. I see in the chat, Genevieve Hummer says, this is my first time being here early. Well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Let's go to a question from Victoria Johnson, who says, I can't find the Son of Neptune. Can you point me in the right direction? Yeah, so what we had to do, I mentioned this last live stream, we had a bit of a copyright issue going up on our primary channel, so we have moved all of our full form content over to a second channel, which is just called Echo Wirm. So Echo Wirm Audiobooks is the main channel, of course. We still do our daily uploads here. This is where you're seeing the live stream from. But if you guys weren't aware, the other full form content has shifted to our other channel at Echo Wirm, just plain. But you can still find all that content on the channel if you check out the playlist. So on Echo Wirm Audiobooks, if you go to the playlists, all of our content should be listed in the various playlists. So if you find the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles playlist, which is all the Percy Jackson Greek-type saga stuff, Son of Neptune should be right after Lost Hero. And it all should be in reading order. So if you guys want to read them in order, the playlist should be directed right there. Let's go to a question from Ashlyn, who says, were the other books private? Kind of same thing. Yeah, they just shifted over to the other channel. So they should all still be in the playlists. If you guys ever can't find anything, just check the playlists is kind of the big thing we're going for. If they're not on YouTube for whatever reason, check Patreon and Vimeo. You can go to patreon.com/EchoWirm, where you can check out our channel over on Vimeo. Just search Echo Wirm as well, and you should be able to find our content that we don't have on YouTube that might also still be up over on either of those places. Let's go to a question from Melanie, who says, can you do the book Legion by Brandon Sanderson? Brandon Sanderson is one of those authors alongside Brandon Mull, the author of Fablehaven, who are in my pipeline. So not necessarily anytime soon, but it is definitely in my list of things to do. Obviously, you see the list of things behind me, and then I have a pile in front of me, which is my immediate read pile. So the stuff behind me is just kind of whenever I can get to it. The stuff in front of me is the stuff that I try to get to a chapter of every day. But yes, we will get there eventually. Brandon Mull as well, like I said, as Brandon Sanderson. Splinky Chicken says, where did the chapter episodes go for the first half of the Blood of Olympus? So what I do typically on this channel, we do daily chapters, right? And then when we get to the end of a book, I will compile all those chapters into a full version and then post that on our other channel. So when we get to the end of Blood of Olympus, all of those chapters will be compiled into a full version of the Blood of Olympus. Problem with Blood of Olympus and other large books like that is if it takes me more than 10 hours to record something like that, I can't upload them all at once on YouTube. So I split them in half. So with Blood of Olympus, I took the first 30 chapters or so and put them in a full version. So you can find the first 30 chapters of Blood of Olympus, as well as something like Dune. You can find the first 2/3 of Dune in their own videos in the playlist titled Dune, but they will have shifted from the regular chapter a day things. That just kind of cleans up the channel. It makes it easier for you guys to find things. Let's go to a question from Colin Chilton, who says, was the Dan Schneider bit in the actual book? Yeah, so this is a reference. I mention all the time, I do little Easter eggs, just because you'd be shocked. I never knew this going into recording audiobooks on YouTube. You would be shocked at how many copycat channels there are out there. everyone is always stealing everybody else's content and uploading them, which kind of bothers me because then I get people in my comments asking, where can I find all of your other recordings? And then people will reply and say, oh, they just uploaded somebody else's content. This isn't their original content. Obviously, this is me. You guys recognize my voice. This is me live on the channel. So all of our recordings on the channel are our own material. But in order to kind of stop people from stealing them, or at least have a way to find what is actually my own content, I will stick little Easter eggs in different chapters. And so one thing I did for, I think it was House of Hades, the beginning of it, there's a scene where Hazel and Jason are washing feet. And I made a Dan Schneider joke having to do with, of course, feet. So no, it's not actually in the book. I just added it as an Easter egg. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, though. Let's go to a question from Atroquinine, who says, any tips for people who wish to do audiobooks themselves, audiobook equipment, book genres, and effective recording setups? I don't know if my way of doing things is the right way to do things, but I'll tell you what I did and what has worked for me. So, first of all, you asked about recording equipment. This is an Audio-Technica AT2020 USB. It's on the back of my microphone, and I don't want to flip my microphone around just because then you guys won't be able to hear me and it's going to sound really poppy. But I just use a little USB microphone that I can plug into my laptop, and then I run it through a program called OBS. I think it stands for like Online Broadcasting Service or Online Broadcasting System or something like that. It's an app on your computer that you can get where you basically set up scenes. So right now I have the video capture device. I'm recording it through just a plug-in camera. You can use your computer's camera, and then my audio mixer is set up through my microphone. And so these combine the things together, and then I can stream through here, or I can just simply record things. And so I record them on this, and then I'll use Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a video editing service. You could also use iMovie, that sort of thing, to compile all of my different chapters together. So that's the setup for what I do. Like I said, it's a USB microphone, and then I just run it through OBS and record things through there, and then upload them straight to YouTube. In terms of, I guess, to generalize your question, how to do well or how to get popular or whatever, it's honestly all luck. It's anything artistic. You just do it until you feel confident in your own abilities. My early recordings are very, very bad. You can find my early recording of Percy Jackson and my early recordings of Harry Potter are very, very different in style to the way that I do things now. My editing, I used to not edit at all for the sake of I'm recording like 3 chapters a day and I don't really have time to edit that much. Nowadays, I do edit a bit more just to be more consistent. And so if I screw something up, I will pause, give myself about 30 seconds of breathing room. That way I can find that pause on YouTube when I go back through the editing software. And then I will restart at the beginning of that paragraph and try to remember the vocal inflections that I used throughout so it stays consistent, that sort of thing. What happened with my channel, why it got so popular, is because of the fact that Percy Jackson had the show coming out. I had recorded my original Percy Jackson video, the Lightning Thief video, way back in January of last year, so a year and a half ago, even more. And by November, or December, when the show started, whatever triggered the algorithm, and people were wanting to read the book prior to, or learn about the book prior to watching the TV show, and the algorithm picked up my videos, and things exploded from there. With that, kind of a blessing and a curse, I have been kind of sticking to a lot of Rick Riordan content, which I love to do. I enjoy Rick Riordan stuff, and so that's the big thing, is always do something that you're comfortable doing, first and foremost, and something that you enjoy doing. Otherwise, you're going to get really bored and not enjoy it. I always bring up Dune. I really enjoy the book Dune. I do not enjoy reading the book Dune as a narrator. It is very hard to narrate, and it took me a long time to get through Dune in recording it. Obviously, you're seeing the full version uploaded daily on the channel. I recorded that several months ago, and it took me a very long time to get through. So do what you love. You could do what's popular. Harry Potter would be Harry Potter's dangerous to do on YouTube. First of all, there's a lot of them. And second of all, you're going to get hit pretty hard with copyright. So when it comes to copyright on YouTube, you want to find authors that are comfortable letting people use their content, Rick Riordan is typically a safe one, whereas Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, those typically are not. The reason I've done those and put them elsewhere is because I knew that with the foundation that we have on the channel, I knew that people would go search for them if I told them where to go. And so finding that fan base is just doing what the people on your channel want you to do, and also something that you enjoy doing. And it's kind of a mix between the two. So, M&M Weekly in the chat says, have you ever heard of The Daughter of Sherlock Holmes series by Leonard Goldberg? The three mains of the titular daughter, Dr. Watson, and his son, John Watson Jr. I've heard of it. I've never read it. But I think someone has, if it wasn't you, someone else requested that a bit ago. It is on my list. And so I will definitely check that out and maybe give it a try eventually going forward here. Feel free to keep asking those questions if you guys have them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep going down my line of pre-prepared questions, and we might have a short stream today, which is totally fine by me. Let's go to a question from Nom Nom Chicken Nuggies, which, fantastic username, says, do you record the chapters separately, then clip them together, or do you read it all in one go? Good question. Definitely not all in one go. There are a couple exceptions. Typically, like my shorter, like kids books, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, A to Z Mysteries, Magic Treehouse, those I will all record in one go because I can typically get them done in a single sitting. Whereas like the Heroes of Olympus series are edging on like 17 to 20 hours. I would not be able to do 17 straight hours of audiobook recording. The big challenge for me is going to come with the release of Wrath of the Triple Goddess, the new Percy Jackson book, which comes out in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. I am going to do my very best to record it all in one sitting. And so my goal with that one, it comes out on a Tuesday, the 24th. My goal is to get to Barnes & Noble early that morning, come home, lock myself in my studio, record it straight through, and hopefully have it to my Patreon, my members on Patreon in either a day or two, and then on the channel the following week. But that's going to be a significant challenge because that's probably 7 straight hours that I'll be recording. But typically I record a chapter at a time. I'll do a few chapters a night, whether it be the same book or different books. It's often different books just so I don't get bored. And then, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, I'll compile all of those together in a full version through something like Premiere Pro. So, another question from Atroquinine, who says, do you plan to eventually do audiobooks for Trials of Apollo, Kane Chronicles, Magnus Chase, and the other short stories that Riordan has released? The answer to that is yes. I do want to caveat that and say that I won't be doing, if I do any, it will be very few of them, of the Rick Riordan Presents series. I've mentioned those on stream before. Those are books that are about mythology, tangentially related to Percy Jackson, and the rest of Rick Riordan's books, but they are not actually written by Rick Riordan himself. And the reason I'm saying no to doing all of those is because there are a lot of them. It is a lot easier for Rick Riordan to stamp his name on something that he didn't write, because there's a lot more of those, than for him to actually write something. So yes, I will do all of the ones that Rick Riordan has written himself, including The Sun and the Star, which is behind me over this shoulder, as well as we've already done the original 5 Percy Jackson and the tangential books. We've already done, or at least I've already finished all of the Heroes of Olympus books and their tangential, like, side books. I have recorded, I'm currently in the process of recording the 3rd Kane Chronicles book. The first 2 are up in full over on Patreon for $3 a month. Red Pyramid will start on the channel on Monday. So yes, Kane Chronicles is coming next. Trials of Apollo will be after Kane Chronicles. I am also currently recording the first Trials of Apollo book. And then after we get done with Trials of Apollo and all of those, then I'll do Magnus Chase as the last one. And then I'll release the new Percy Jackson books basically as they come out, hopefully. M&M Weekly says, have you heard of visual novels? Not entirely. If you want to describe what they are, maybe I have heard of them, and I'm just not familiar with the term visual novels. Sarah W. says, would you ever read the Red Queen series and the Lunar Chronicles series? I'm not familiar with them. I want to say someone has requested the Red Queen series before. It may have been you, because I think it is on my list, but I've never read either of them, so I'll check them out. Klee in the chat says, yay, Kane Chronicles. Yeah, I am genuinely enjoying my reread of the Kane Chronicles. The second and third books start a little slow for my liking, but I am going to stand by my statement that I made a few weeks ago before I had finished Throne of Fire and say that, yeah, Throne of Fire is probably my favorite Keen Chronicles book. Very good. I was about halfway through and I went, is this going in the direction I am enjoying? And then by the end of the book, I was like, that was pretty solid. So Throne of Fire is a solid book. Like I said, if you guys want to read that in advance of the channel, $3 a month. That's all you got to do to get access prior to it airing on the channel. That's over on patreon.com/EchoWorm. Let's go to a question from Jessica Jennings, who says, what's with Percy misgendering magical creatures? That's a good question. Off the top of my head, the only one that I can think of is Blackjack. But there are times where in the editing of the books, or the writing of the books and the editing of them, several mistakes have popped through. So, for example, I have the first editions of every single Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus book. And in terms of editing, there are a lot of times where, like, there are just words missing. Like the word "the" will just be missing, or like a prepositional phrase will just be completely missing in the book. And so as I'm reading through them, I'm like, what is that trying to say? Because obviously they were printing them way faster than they had the time to edit them. So the original editions of a lot of these books have a lot of typos and a lot of grammatical errors in them. But in terms of like lore editing, I think the one you're referring to is Blackjack. So Blackjack is Percy's Pegasus. And Blackjack first appears unnamed in the Sea of Monsters, the second book. And Percy notices he calls the Pegasus a mare, which is a female horse. But then in the next book, Blackjack appears and is male. And so that was kind of retconned going into the third book. The other instance that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is the appearance of Garrus, the god of old age, who is a main character in Chalice of the Gods, which is the new Percy Jackson book. Garrus appears in House of Hades as a female, referred to as a crone or an old woman, and then Garrus, like I said, reappears later in Chalice of the Gods as a male. And in Greek mythology, Garrus has always been a male. So the fact that Garrus showed up as a female in House of Hades is kind of interesting to me, at least in the first edition. They have changed that in later editions, and you can't even find that on the wiki. Last I checked the wiki, that's not something that is canonized in within the fandom, but in the original edition of House of Hades, Garrus does show up as female. So, yeah, it's just an editing mistake. There's another instance of Selena Beauregard having different eye colors between books. I'm trying to think of another one. There are probably several more that just were missed in the editing phase of at least the first edition, so I'm not entirely sure. Sarah W. says, I'd also love if you could add the Shatter Me series and the Selection series to the list. I will check them out as well. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate all of the suggestions. You guys are always welcome to suggest books. There are certain ones that I will turn down just for personal reasons, but very rarely is that the case. Let's go to a question from Tumble Lily, who says, the new Percy Jackson book comes out on September 24th. Are you going to buy it and read it? Yes. I think I just mentioned that. So there are 3 new Percy Jackson books coming out of order, right? So we talk about this all the time. It's kind of a mess. There were the first 5 Percy Jackson books, then there were the 5 Heroes of Olympus books, and then Rick Riordan wrote the 5 Trials of Apollo books, and then there's The Sun and the Star, which takes place after the Trials of Apollo. But then he decided to go back and write, it's going to be at least 3 more Percy Jackson books, but they take place before Trials of Apollo. So after Heroes of Olympus now, we have 3 new Percy Jackson books. One of them is out. It's called The Chalice of the Gods. It will air on the channel on Monday. I think I said Kane Chronicles airs on Monday. It doesn't. It airs on Tuesday. Monday is going to be Chalice of the Gods. It's already available on Patreon if you want to check it out. And then Wrath of the Triple Goddess is the second of those new trilogy of books. That comes out on September 24th. I think 19 days from today. What's the date today? The 12th? Do the math for me. 12 days from today. Holy moly, that's soon. And then there will be a third one probably next September to finish out that trilogy. So yes, I'm going to buy it and read it. Hopefully have it out to my patrons within a day or two. and then have it out on the channel in about a week. Question from Grilled Cheese. Very nice name. Annabeth's dad teaches history, right? Yeah, so this was in response to me asking on the channel. I do these daily trivia questions on the main channel. And I think the question was, what subject does Paul Blofus teach? And I got a lot of people with that one. A lot of people said either ancient Greek, because I put that as one of the options, and I also put history. Paul Blofus is an English teacher. That's how he and Sally met, because Sally, Percy's mom, is a writer and a fan of English. But Grilled Cheese asks, Annabeth's dad teaches history, right? Yes. Annabeth's dad is a World War II historian and military historian. And so he actually teaches at the West Point Academy, the United States Military Academy. And he is a professor of history, specifically in military tactics and World War II, I believe. Eminem Weekly says, visual novels are books that you read on your phone. They're like graphic novels that you not only read on your phone, there's various apps for them, like choices stories that you play. I've never heard of them, actually. They sound like an interactive graphic novel. If I'm on the right track, let me know. But no, I've never heard of them. That's very interesting. Yeah, you said visual novels, and I was like, do you mean graphic novels, or what specifically are we talking about here? I do know there's some cool channels that will do audiobooks, but they'll also like use artwork either. So typically when you find it like a children's audiobook on YouTube, they'll have like the pages and the artwork on them. And I know people who will use artwork from like fans or from like the graphic novels if they have them to do like visual audiobooks on YouTube, which are really cool as well. I wish I had the time to do that for you guys. I don't. I'm sorry. Sarah W says, one thing I like about the books is that Hades isn't the villain the demigods have to fight against. Yeah, I mentioned last week, I won't go too far into it because it got a little theological and historical. But I mentioned that part of the reason that we today think of Hades as kind of the villain character in Greek mythology is because of the effect that Christianity has had on mythology over the years. Just kind of trying to juxtapose Zeus and Hades against the Christian versions of God and Satan. So it's very interesting. I went into detail on it in our last live stream if you want to go check that out. If you'd like a longer explanation as to the history between those two subjects. Feel free to keep asking questions. I'm going to go to one from Duck, who says, when will more Game of Thrones when will more chapters of Game of Thrones be released? Good question. So Game of Thrones chapters are right now at least Game of Thrones, the book, are kind of a perk for patrons. I'm not going at a very fast pace. There are like 75 chapters in Game of Thrones, or 73, I think, to be exact. And I've only been doing one a week. So it's going to take over a year to finish it. Good news is we're already to chapter 25 next week. So every Monday in the afternoon, if you're in the United States, for patrons, I upload a chapter of A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, which is the first book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, which the show Game of Thrones is based off of. While I am reading that, I am also side by side, at the same time, reading the book called Fire and Blood, which is the prequel to Game of Thrones, which is what the show House of the Dragon is based off of. So I have a large number of the chapters of Fire and Blood available to the public, but they're only over on Patreon right now. Once I finish the book, it'll be up on Vimeo as well. Game of Thrones is one of those you don't typically want to throw that up on YouTube for copyright purposes. So that will stay over on Patreon and Vimeo. Once it's done, it'll be public for everybody, but right now, Game of Thrones specifically is only accessible to my paying members. And once a week, every Monday, you'll get a new chapter of that. Eminem Weekly says, you're right, visual novels are like interactive graphic novels that you can read and also choose things that happen in the story. Choices stories you play as an... Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I see advertisements for those kind of apps all the time. Yeah, it's basically like a visual graphic novel mixed with a choose your own adventure story, essentially. Gotcha. I only have a few more pre-prepared questions, so if you guys want to keep asking stuff in the chat, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, like I said, we'll talk about the future of the channel, and we might have a short stream this week, which is totally fine by me. Let's go to a question from John Bogg, who says, will there be more Dune in the future? Yeah, right now we are through, I want to say, the first 40 chapters of Dune. There are 48 chapters in the first book. So we have about a week left. I want to say the full version, all three versions will air next week, Friday. The first two are available if you check the Dune playlist. You should be able to read through the first 2/3 of Dune, and the third will be up, I want to say, either Friday or Saturday next week. So 8 more days, and then the full first book should be up. I will release at least the second book because I think they're going to end up making the second book into either a TV show or a third movie in the series. But beyond that, I'm not sure if I want to. Just for the sake of subject material, for the sake of length, for the sake of there are a lot of other books I want to get to first. If you guys know the subject material of the fourth book, it's not conducive to an audiobook format necessarily. It's like a philosophy book masking itself as a novel, even more than Dune already is. The second one is pretty readable. It's a lot more along the lines of the first book. So you'll probably see that up on the channel in January, maybe a little earlier, probably late December on Patreon. But yeah, the entirety of Dune is up on Patreon right now, and it will be up on the channel in full next week. Eminem Weekly says, have you ever heard of The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hillenbrand? I have not. I will check it out, see if I can find it at my local Barnes & Noble. Weird question for you guys. Is Barnes & Noble the only bookstore where you're from? Because like when I grew up, there were we had local bookstores. All of them in my town have shut down now. You can find a few of the Goodwill stores in town have like book selections and big selections of used books. But for the longest time, like we had a Barnes & Noble, we had a Borders, there were a lot of bookstores, and now it feels like Barnes & Noble is the only one that hasn't gone out of business. So let me know what your local bookstore is. I'd love to know. My last pre-prepared question comes from Revelra. I do apologize for pronouncing obviously one of those wrong, at least, saying, will you be doing Lord of the Rings? So I mentioned earlier, Lord of the Rings is one of those properties that you cannot put on YouTube. It is very hard to even do like analytical versions of any of the Tolkien properties because of copyright. It's a mess of a story if you guys know the backstory to how the different properties of J.R.R. Tolkien were split between his kids and then sold off to various ventures. This is the reason why Amazon has the rights to like the appendices of Lord of the Rings, but they don't have access to certain characters. Like they could never do something about Frodo or whatever. It's very confusing, and because of that, the copyright limitations are very, very strict. And like they have copyright lawyers pouncing on stuff on YouTube all the time. So the answer is yes, though. I will do them eventually. Right now, I am finishing up my recording of the final Chronicles of Narnia book. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to add The Hobbit to the pile behind me and just kind of get to it when I can. It's not going to be a daily chapter book like Narnia has been. So I'm guessing I probably won't get to finishing The Hobbit until about March. I know that seems a really long ways away, but keep in mind I have been doing this for a year and a half now. And this is as far as we are with Percy Jackson and Harry Potter and all that sort of stuff. So yes, Hobbit first. Lord of the Rings will come a bit after. Sir W says Perfect Couple is now a show on Netflix. I feel like I haven't been on Netflix in a long time. Sir W says I live in New York, so there's plenty of bookstores. Yeah, New York probably has quite a few. I am definitely not from what you would call a major U.S. city. Oliver Finstead says, new haircut. Either way, it looks good, bro. Yes, it is. My wife finally convinced me to shave the sides of my head and dye my hair back to its regular color. So this is my natural hair color. People were joking that they were surprised I looked more like Jason than Percy. I don't know who I look more like. Yeah, I don't know. My natural hair color is a very light brown, as you see on the screen at least. Let's see here. Sarah W says, I usually get my books from Amazon, though, because I don't like price stickers on my... I get that. Yeah, you can kind of see this one here. It has a price sticker on it from Thrift Books. Thrift Books is really nice, but yeah, they have stickers on them as well. Amazon, that's the reason they're so big. They were a bookstore to start with. M&M Weekly says, have you ever heard of the Nancy Drew files? I consider them slightly superior to the original series. How about the Hardy Boys? Yeah, I think Sarah, actually, in the chat was the one that was asking me about Nancy Drew for a while. Yeah, I've read them both. I grew up with them because those are from my parents grew up reading those books. So I don't know if I actually have Nancy Drew in my collection at the moment. I'm sure they're at my mom's place somewhere. I do have the Hardy Boys, like 4 of the Hardy Boys books, but they are in the pipeline. They have been requested before. Sarah W. says, do you organize your books on your bookshelves? I have so many series and I'm wondering myself how I should organize them all together. Yeah, I haven't mentioned my book collection in a long time. I have over 1,000 books in my house at the moment. And you guys know me and my organizational skills. Yeah, they are all ordered. All of the fiction books are ordered by last name. My nonfiction books are ordered by subject, not in the Dewey Decimal System. I have all my biographies together. So I have all of the presidential biographies listed in order of like presidents in order. Same with I have like a list of biographies on the kings and queens of England, and those are all in order chronologically. I have presidential autobiographies and books written by presidents in order of precedence. And then like all of my nonfiction books are kind of out of order down below. Sorry, I got distracted in the chat there. Mateo, please stop spamming the chat if you wouldn't mind. That would be much appreciated, or otherwise I'm going to have to ban you from the chat. Let's go to, let's see here. Sarah W. says, 1,000 books is considered a library. Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, in addition to all of them being sorted, I have a specific like spreadsheet on my computer where I have every single book listed, the author, the publisher, the edition that I have, and the original price of the book. That way, you know, God forbid my house were to ever burn down, I have a record of every single thing that I have in my house. Have the same thing with baseball cards as well. It's kind of excessive, but let's see here. M&M Weekly says, Harry Potter question. Was Snape using legilimency during his talk with Bellatrix in The Half-Blood Prince? Very likely, yes. Well, okay, so legilimency or occlumency is the question, because absolutely to occlumency, he was definitely blocking her from getting into his head. He is probably, of all the wizards we know in the wizarding world, there might be some that are considered canon that I don't know about, that J.K. Rowling has talked about on Pottermore or Wizarding World. But at least in the main series, Snape is the most decorated occlumens, or at least the most celebrated occlumens that Dumbledore has ever heard of, or has ever been witness to, and that's part of why he's such a good double agent against Voldemort. In the interaction at the beginning of Half-Blood Prince, he is absolutely using occlumens. The question is he using legilimency, which is the act of not just blocking your brain from someone else, but using it yourself? The answer is probably, because there are things that he says in anticipation of Bellatrix's questions where either he thinks the questions are very obvious, or he is actively reading her mind to come up with answers himself to dissuade her from thinking that he is a traitor, if that makes any sense. So I would say the answer is yes. It's maybe about a 50-50 or maybe like a 60-40, but the answer is almost certainly yes. Let's go to Sarah W. says, would you ever show your bookshelves with your book collection? Yeah, I can turn my camera around right now. Sorry to make you guys dizzy real quick, but if I flip this around here, around my computer, there you can see all of my Rick Riordan stuff. But that is my primary bookshelf. Those are 2 levels of a 5-level bookshelf, and that's just my office. There's a bookshelf behind me, behind my back, that you guys can't see. There's a bookshelf off to this side that you guys can't see, and then there are several bookshelves in the next room and upstairs and in my son's room, where I have all of like my children's books and my biographies and that sort of thing. So yeah, my fiction library is right behind me. I would say that holds, if I had to make a guess, I'd say about 650 to 700 books. So yeah, very proud of it. it's something I've always wanted. So now, as a homeowner and someone who has the ability to budget, I don't know, $50 to books every month, I do that. Let's see here. Matilda Fritz says, cool. Thank you, Matilda. Diz says, have you ever read the Lorien Legacy series? Is it one you would consider? I've never read it, and I don't think I've ever heard of it, actually. So I will check it out and see if it's something worth adding to the list. Matilda Fritz says, how are you? I always listen to Harry Potter. Thank you for asking. I am doing very well. It's been a very busy week. My primary job that I kind of mention all the time, I do have a full-time job outside of YouTube, and it centers around the school year. And so now into September, post Labor Day, this was like a very busy week for me with everything going on. So between my regular job and between YouTube and that sort of thing, and doing things in the meantime and working on my novel and that sort of thing, I will have put in about 70 hours of work by the end of this week. So if I seem a little wild, and I know some of you guys were here from the start of the live stream, if you guys were waiting about 10-15 minutes, that was the only 10 minutes that I had today to fit in with my son, which I feel very guilty of. But if I have the time to do it, I will absolutely prioritize my family over something like this. So yeah, I'm doing all right. It's just been a very, very busy, hectic week. So thank you for asking. How are you guys doing? Eminem Weekly says, I believe he used legitimacy because he barely reacted to Bellatrix's rage. He mainly talked in his usual flat and lazy tone. Yeah, I don't, not to dissuade that answer, but that is, he does that all the time. And the reason that he does that is not necessarily because of legitimacy or because of occlumency. That is just his way to dissuade people from thinking he is a double agent. He's very stoic. He's kind of always been that way, but he puts on a face in order to dissuade people from questioning his allegiance. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, very pretty. I also wanted to recommend the Mortal Instruments series as well. I'm questioning where the Mortal Instruments series is on my list. Yeah, I gotta think about that one. Can't remember. Actually, hold on. Pause for a second. Yeah. Sorry, I was confusing Mortal Instruments with another series. Yes, Mortal Instruments is absolutely on my list. Let's go to a question from John Paul, who says, what is the radiation effect about? Good question. I mentioned my novel that I'm writing. I mention this every live stream. There is a book on the channel that you guys can find, which is an original work. It's called The Radiation Effect. I have this big bright red placeholder title. I would love to pay someone to make actual artwork for the cover of The Radiation Effect. But it's kind of, it's both a novel and a social experiment, because as I am writing the first full draft of The Radiation Effect, which I've been doing since last December, I am actively uploading the chapters to the channel. And so it's a bit of a, I know where the story is going. I'm a bit of a garden writer, so I kind of let the story take me as I write it, but I do have a general outline for it, and I'm always interested to see your guys' feedback on things, to see, maybe there's questions that you guys have that I should have foreshadowed better, or that sort of thing. And so as I'm writing it, I love seeing your guys' feedback as I do it. But like I said, that's called The Radiation Effect. First 13 chapters are up on the channel. 14th chapter airs tomorrow afternoon, and I'm currently working on the 15th chapter. It should be up for patrons probably next week, and then up on the channel the week following as well. Right now it's looking like the first book is going to be about 31 chapters, and so once I get to 16, I'll have to split it in half. But once we get to 16, I think I'm going to re-record the first few chapters, and then I'll put up the first full half as a full version on the second channel. Yeah, very excited. But you asked what it's about. It's a bit like, I always tell people it's a bit like X-Men in terms of its setting, but when it comes down to the storyline, it's very much not a comic book story. It's a political thriller along the lines of The Prince by Machiavelli or the House of Cards series, is kind of the strict inspiration for the storyline. It's about these 6 kids who they come from families that were tested on during the atomic age and developed superpowers, essentially. And because of that, and their genetic traits passing down through the years, during their high school years, they are contracted to serve this military private company and go on various missions for people who will hire them to do things. And oftentimes these missions aren't always for the good of everybody. It's people are willing to pay the company, and so the kids have to go out and do these things. So there's a bit of political intrigue there. It's a little sketchy. One of the main characters, her dad is the head of the program at the moment. It's almost like a political system, so he is the elected leader of the company. And as the book goes on, we learn that he kind of has ulterior motives to the general good of everybody. And so some of these characters find out that he is playing them, and it's more of a political thriller than anything. But because of the setting, it's got kind of that superhero comic book intrigue to it. And then because the kids are, in the first book, 14, 15 years old, it is very much a coming-of-age, almost romance novel, with the motivations of the main characters specifically. So if you mash that all into one, that's the story of the book. So if you want to check that out, like I said, 13, soon to be 14 chapters are available on the channel. Let's see here. Eminem Weekly says the Mortal Instruments series is the first in the Shadowhunters Chronicles book franchise. Yeah, I was definitely thinking of oh gosh. I was definitely thinking of another series, which is written by an author that for personal reasons I will not be reading on the channel. But ignore that; it has nothing to do with the Mortal Instruments. I am very familiar with it. Yeah, I'd love to read Mortal Instruments on the channel someday. It is on the list. Let's see here. Sarah W says, "When do you hope to release your book one day?" Good question. It depends when I can first of all, when I can finish it. When I get halfway through, I'm going to revise it and then send it to an editor. I actually have an editor lined up at the moment. So I am going to just go through, re-edit the first draft into a second draft, send the second draft to an editor, get feedback on it, and then finish the rest of it. And my goal is to have at least a finished first draft done by the end of next summer. So in terms of when to get it published, spring to summer of 2026 is kind of the goal right now. The current outline sees it being a 7-book series, with the first 4 books taking place during their high school years, and then the final 3 books taking place right after high school into their early college years. That way it gives time to space out certain stories, certain character arcs, and allow the stories to get a little heavier as time goes on with the ages of the characters. Because there's just some subject material that I would think is inappropriate giving to characters at the age they are in the first book. So definitely a growing and maturing story as it goes on. So that's the current timeline. We'll see what happens. So I am currently caught up with all of the questions that I see pre-prepared or in the chat. I will do a check through just the channel again, see if there's anything you guys want answered. If you guys have any more questions that you want answered, feel free to drop them in the chat right now. Otherwise, I just wanted to go through just what the future looks like on the channel. So over on Patreon, we are currently about 4 to 6 weeks in advance of the channel. That is $3 a month. That's all it takes to get everything in access on Patreon. So that includes, like I said, that 4 to 6 weeks ahead of the channel. Right now on the channel, we are finishing up Blood of Olympus. Chalice of the Gods will drop on Monday. Kane Chronicles will start on Tuesday. And then in addition to that, Dune will continue through next Friday or Saturday. I can't remember the exact date. Following Dune, then we will move on to the Silver Chair, which is the sixth of the Chronicles of Narnia books. Once we're done with those two, those being the Red Pyramid, which is the first of the Kane Chronicles, and the Silver Chair, then we will move on to book 2 of the Kane Chronicles, which is Throne of Fire, and The Hunger Games will be our next non-Rick Riordan book. Currently over on Patreon, we are on The Hunger Games as well as the 3rd book in the Kane Chronicles series, which is titled The Serpent's Shadow. And so if you want access to everything I've just talked about that's not yet on the channel, up to the Hunger Games and the Serpent's Shadow. $3 a month gets you all of that, as well as downloadable versions of the files. If you guys are paying members on Patreon and you want access to that, just DM me with a Gmail account or an email that I can send you access to that folder. You have access as long as you are a $3 a month or more member on Patreon. Also over on Patreon, I mentioned Game of Thrones. You also get additional content. Like I said, my chapters of my book are up in advance of the channel by about a week. Various other things will typically air on Patreon in advance of the channel by about a week. And then there's different tiers to Patreon. So all of that for $3 a month or more. If you go $5 a month or more, then I pop your cute little name on the screen in 3, 2, 1. These are my last updated $5 a month or more patrons. We got Andrew Gomez, Angela Rodriguez, Aiden, Braden Vera, Cult, Derek Rosario, Duncan Burley, Aaron Marie Thompson, Faye Coy, Anawuchek, Hardip Singh, Judah Quadrizius. I will get better. That is the first time I've said that on camera. Kylie Morton, Lindsay Wood, Kate S., Lucy Ranson, Lucy with an IE, Lyra, MB, Matsukur, Mika Tamandal, Mirage GSM, Moses Ojibodi, Nathaniel Barlow, Nicole, Peyton Austin, Nickerdoodles, R. Sadie Martinez, Skylar Seidenkranz, Srinija Srinivasan, Taylor Grande, Tiffany Martinez, Trevor Lyman, X-Ray, Alexei Staryakov, Sierra Cordova, Adora Shadow, Elias Quigg, Faded, and Riley Smeaton. As well as, I see Fears in the chat, these ones. $10 a month or more is my League 2 patrons. That's Brandon Doty, Hessa Al-Habashi, Rockin' Ryan, Victoria Libretto, Rania, Katie Rose, Bella Joy, Goose, and Annette John Taylor. League 1, that's $15 a month or more, is Snevatics and Brooke Bursma. And then this is where it gets really cool. My top tier patrons, $25 a month or more, John Buck, Charles Jacobson, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Zhukov Crawford, and Joseph Morrill. And the reason I bring up them specifically is at $25 a month or more, you join the Echo Worm Book Club. So for no extra cost, just the $25 a month or more, at the start of every single month, I will send you a free copy of whatever book we are on over on Patreon. So for the start of this month, I just sent out copies of The Throne of Fire to all of my $25 a month or more patrons. I know that's not always reasonable for your budget, and that is totally fine. If you're able to do those $3 a month, feel free to do so. Otherwise, don't feel bad. You're not missing any content. Everything that is available over on Patreon will eventually be available for free as well. But then, yeah, if you have the availability to do that $25 a month or more, you get a free book every month. Fears says the book club is great. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do for you guys every month. So, Eminem Weekly says, follow-up post about High Fire by Owen Colfer. It's a modern-day fantasy novel that takes place in Louisiana. Interesting. And the reason I say interesting specifically is because Owen Colfer is from Ireland. And it is interesting to me that he would write about Louisiana, or at least take place in Louisiana. Like, for example, like a lot of authors will write about where they're from. So Rick Riordan is from the Northeast, lives in the Northeast. Most of his stories take place in the Northeast of the United States. I am from the Midwest. I have spent a significant amount of my life in and around the Dakotas and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Wyoming. And so my story takes place in Wyoming. Anyways, yeah. Side tangent aside, Eminem Weekly also asks, when did you officially start using Patreon? I think I started using as a member for other channels. I became a member of In Deep Geek Patreon, which is another channel you guys should go check out. Either In Deep Geek or IDG Live. Robert is doing a live stream right now at the same time that I do mine. Tell him Ty from Echo Worm says hi. He'll know who you're talking about. I'm a longtime patron of his. I think that was about 5 years ago. But in terms of my own creator account, I think I started this one in December. Because I think my earliest post on Patreon, I want to say, was around Christmas time. So that's when I started using it. Didn't go very far, but now we're at I think we're at 16 or 1700 members on Patreon, which the fact that 1700 people want to listen to me read books is beyond wild to me. Let's see here. Eminem Weekly also says, another book series recommendation, The Castor Chronicles by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. modern day fantasy supernatural Southern Gothic novel series that is set in South Carolina. I will definitely check it out. I love like Southern Gothic. I think that's why I've enjoyed Hazel's story again so much, is because her being from the South and having that like child of the god of the dead kind of vibe definitely gives me like a Southern Gothic vibe. Even Anubis in Kane Chronicles, even though he's like, I've been using a British accent because he typically only appears like in either Egypt or England, his like graveyard vibes give me that Southern Gothic vibe to him. Avocado Toast Bubbles says, hi, it's Perkabeth. I missed the last stream because of school. Glad to have you here. I like the new name, Avocado Toast Buddies. Thank you for being here. If you have questions that you want answered, you're more than welcome to ask them now. We're kind of wrapping up the chat, but you guys are always more than welcome to keep asking questions until we run out of stuff to talk about. But I did get off topic because I was talking about what's coming up on the channel, and I mentioned up to where we're at now with Patreon, which is The Serpent's Shadow, the final of the Kane Chronicles books, as well as the Hunger Games. Hunger Games should finish first, and after the Hunger Games, we will then do the final book in the Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle. After we get done with that, then we will go to Catching Fire, which is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy. It's my favorite book in the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm very excited to read that one. And then after that, we'll do Fablehaven, at least the first one. And then after Fablehaven, we will do the third Hunger Games book, Mockingjay. That will pretty much put us till the end of the year, at least on the channel, on Patreon. I still haven't quite decided. I think Aragon will probably be next after that, but I haven't quite decided where I want to go after we're done with the Hunger Games trilogy. In terms of Rick Riordan content, after we're done with the Kane Chronicles, like I said, we'll do the 3 straight through starting on Monday. Once we're done with Kane Chronicles, then we will do Trials of Apollo. So that Trials of Apollo should be popping up on Patreon at the end of, if I do the math here, beginning of October sometime, and we'll probably hit the channel end of November, early December, if I have my timing right. Pergabest says, you got your Starbies? I don't. I mentioned earlier it was a very, very busy week for me, and specifically a very busy day. I had 15 minutes where I could have come home and spent time with my son, or stopped to get my usual Starbucks, and I decided to spend it with my family. So I am instead drinking a Grape Propel, which doesn't have the caffeine, and I'm starting to feel it. So hopefully next stream I will have my Starbucks. Eminem Weekly says, I plan to do my own audiobook readings in the future. You inspired me to do them. Thanks. Well, let me know when you start. I would love to promote your channel in any way I can. And just, I'm always, I hate when people steal my content. I hate when other audiobook channels are copying what I do. But if you're doing your own original content, I would be more than happy to support you. There are plenty of other audiobook channels that I'd love to send people to. Jay Reads is a really solid one. The one that gave me inspiration to start my own audiobook channel was James Dobson, who typically James Dobinson, excuse me, when you look up Harry Potter audiobooks, there's typically one that you'll find on several different channels. That is James Dobinson's original recording. He's the one that inspired me to start my own audiobook channel. As well as I mentioned Robert from In Deep Geek. He has his own audiobook channel. It's fantastic. Robert's got an incredible voice, and he is an incredible audio editor. And his channel is called The Well-Told Tale. He typically does older stories, Dracula, Frankenstein, as you guys... Sorry, that sounded very pretentious. I typically pronounce it Frankenstein, which is the traditional German pronunciation, but yes. Anyways, got off track there. He does Jules Verne. He's done 1984. He's done, I want to say... I don't know if he's done Of Mice and Men because of the words in there, but he's done a lot of older stories, and that's called The Well-Told Tale, a fantastic audiobook channel that I would highly recommend you guys checking out. Perkerbest says, when is your next stren? I'm assuming you mean stream. Good question. 2 weeks. Well, okay, so next Thursday, what we're doing right now is every other week will be a different thing. So in 2 weeks, we'll do our next live stream. So that is the 26th of September, probably around that 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock Eastern time like we usually do. But then next week, Thursday, sometime in the evening, my time, which is Central American time, we will do our podcast that we've started. So if you guys haven't checked it out yet, we started a podcast on this channel where we are basically going through all of the books that we're doing on the channel. We're starting with, of course, the first book that I ever recorded on the channel, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or obviously I have the British version here, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which I've also recorded a version of, which is much better than my first version. And the podcast, we record it every Thursday. You can find the first 2 episodes anywhere. You can find it on the channel if you look up our, it's called the Echo Chamber. I am not claiming responsibility for that name. The name for that came from, I want to say it was Rain. It was either Rain or Twinkle Rose over on my Discord channel, who gave the suggestion to name it the Echo Chamber, which is appropriate. So if you guys look up Echo Wirm on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or I think it's on Amazon Music, and I don't think Google Play exists anymore, but anywhere you get your podcast from, or YouTube, look up Echo Wirm or the Echo Wirm Echo Chamber, and you should find the first 2 episodes of our audio or of our podcast, where we're talking about the different chapters and things inside Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. We'll do Harry Potter, and then we'll do Percy Jackson as well beyond that. So please check that out if you're able to. Even if you don't listen that much, just doing the follow button or the download button, whether or not you listen, it really, really helps to just gain traction with the different algorithms feeding into the different podcast sites. So would love to see you guys there if that's something you're interested in joining. But that'll be next Thursday that we record that live on the channel. Let's see here. Eminem Weekly says, I will do that. Thank you. I will be doing that under the channel name Flick Street Productions. Check it out in the next week or so. Okay, remind me next live stream, and I'll definitely have a chance to check that out by that time. My next couple weeks are a little booked. Sarah W. says, I remember reading somewhere that J.K. Rowling said she wanted Harry and Hermione to end up together, but that characters kind of have a mind of their own, and Hermione somehow gravitated to Ron. Yeah, she has mentioned that before. That, at least in her original plan, Harry and Hermione were the ones to end up together. That's kind of the typical trope of fiction. If you have a group of 3, typically either 2 boys and a girl or 2 girls and a boy, the main character is going to end up with the member of that trio in the opposite sex. I think of shows from my childhood. The ones that come to mind for me were like iCarly or Unfabulous, or even animated shows like Danny Phantom had kind of that same dynamic. But with Harry Potter, it's different because the main character doesn't end up with the girl. The side main character ends up with the girl. And so J.K. Rowling has mentioned before that her original plan was to put Harry and Hermione together. And the more the series went on, it made more sense, given where they started from, that Harry and Hermione's story was more of a sibling-like relationship, and it was Ron and Hermione that really kind of formed into the romantic relationship. And it's very well written. You may not like it because of the way the films were, and part of the problem with the films, or at least the reason that people watching the films see the chemistry between Harry and Hermione, is during the Harry Potter filming, I can't remember which film specifically, but Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson actually dated while they were filming the films. And so they have that dynamic, whereas Rupert Grint and Emma Watson don't necessarily have that romantic chemistry, and specifically Daniel Radcliffe with Bonnie Wright, who played Ginny, don't have that romantic chemistry. But in the book, it very clearly, the people who end up together are the ones who should have ended up together, at least in my opinion. Sarah W. says, is there any writing you've done where you wanted it to go somewhere and it ended up going somewhere else? Absolutely. I think I mentioned this last stream, or it might have even been on the podcast, where my chapters get really, really long because one of my pet peeves in reading, or at least nitpicking what I consider weak writing, is when conversations in books or even in TV shows or movies go in directions that aren't natural. And a lot of time when it comes to TV or film, it has to do with the editing, because you have to shorten conversations to fit it into a specific time. But when it comes to books, if a character or a conversation goes in a direction that isn't organic to where the conversation should be progressing, and specifically you have lines in the conversation that don't fit with what the characters should say, given the way that the characters have been built up. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. And so when I'm writing, for example, chapter 15 of The Radiation Effect, I needed to throw a conversation in there because otherwise it's just a very exposition-heavy chapter, or at least just a narrative chapter, not a lot of conversations. But, sorry, there's a police car going behind me. Got distracted. I live next to a major roadway. It sucks sometimes when I'm recording. But when I'm writing and all of a sudden the conversation, I have an idea where I want it to end and I have a place where to start it. But sometimes getting from A to B requires me to develop it organically in a way that what I anticipate to be a page-long conversations ends up as 3 pages or 4 pages or 5 pages. And then my chapters get really long and I don't want to edit it down because it may kill the pacing of the chapter, but it is organic to what the characters would say in conversation. And so, like, for me, when I call myself a garden writer, I have an idea where I want each chapter to go, but the characters that I'm writing, I have been sitting on for 10 years. And these characters are so well established in my head with their personalities and their motivations and where they are in the story at the moment that I can't deviate from that. I can't change them unless I change a major aspect of their character, which would require me to go back and rethink the entire story. And so in that, yes, then what I anticipated to be a 300-page book ends up probably going to be a 500 to 600-page book, which is great, but it's taken a lot longer to write than I would want to. Another famous garden writer is George R.R. Martin. There's a reason The Winds of Winter has taken over 13 years to write. It's because he had an idea where he wanted it to go, and the story got out of hand. And boom, now it's taking him decades to write this book. Let's see here. Atlantis Gaming says, do you think you're going to watch the new Wizards of Waverly Place reboot when it comes out? Have they announced it? I know they've been talking about it for a long time. I didn't know that they officially announced it. I'm a little out of the loop when it comes to Disney Channel or even Nickelodeon like news. But yeah, I'll probably watch it. I didn't watch the Zoe 101 reboot. I heard it was terrible. I watched the iCarly reboot. I didn't necessarily enjoy it. I didn't enjoy That's So Raven. I didn't enjoy Fuller House. So typically, like, I don't typically enjoy reboots that much, but Wizards of Waverly Place was kind of like right in the middle of my like golden age of watching TV. That was the age when I was like at the peak of watching Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, alongside like iCarly, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll probably end up watching it. Pergabest says, I'm listening while packing for 6th grade camp next Wednesday. Well, enjoy that. Have a lot of fun at that. Eminem Weekly says, what are your thoughts on James Patterson, and what is your favorite series of his? I'm going to cheat because I know there's a lot of James Patterson novels, and I'm going to forget one of his series if I don't really think about it. Oh boy. James Patterson books. And of course my internet isn't loading, so let me use my phone. Give me a sec. James Patterson. Different books of his. Let's see here. My favorite of his different series. That's a really good question. I like Perfect Assassin. Sorry, I know I'm leaving you guys on dead space at the moment. I don't know if I have a specific answer series-wise. I know there are like certain books of his that I really, really enjoy. Private Moscow I enjoyed. I mean, Alex Cross is kind of the easy answer. So I'll stick with that. But yeah, I would say of all the James Patterson books that I definitely haven't read them all, but of the ones that I've read, I would say Perfect Assassin is probably my favorite of his books. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, I love James Patterson, especially his middle school with Race and Theo series and iFunny series. Wizards of Waverly Place reboot it's already coming out in October. Man, I'm out of it. I need to pay attention, I guess. I guess I've been busy. Eminem Weekly says, I think George R. R. Martin's books take too long because he has no one to tell him no and give him necessary advice. Some people are guilty of this. Yeah, I think there's credence to that. I don't think there's people necessarily not telling him no. If anything, there are too many people in his ear telling him what to change. Specifically, so let me move my pile here. When it comes to George R. R. Martin, and actually this is the wrong book. The one I'm looking for is behind me. His primary editors, excuse me while I sneak my head around here. Elio and Linda are his two main lore editors, if that makes any sense. He wrote World of Ice and Fire alongside two superfans, essentially, who have become his lore editors, which basically means his world is so big that he oftentimes has a hard time keeping track of things, and they edit his books not just as editors, but as people that keep track of the lore to make sure that the things he is writing is in line with the stuff that he's read before. And so when it comes to Game of Thrones, yes, people should have told him to stick to... It was originally a trilogy, was the plan to make it a trilogy, and he probably should have stuck with that. I would argue that the first three books are almost perfect works of fantasy, mature fantasy fiction. He probably should have been told no on splitting Feast and Dance in two, because that has drastically lengthened the series. He probably should have been told, don't get too involved in your TV series, because then you're not going to be able to write the books as fast as you want. And maybe while you're writing this book, you should focus on finishing the main series before you continue with the side novella series and adding 2 prequels and a world book. And yeah. So yeah, you're probably right about a lot of that. Eminem Weekly says, I have read James Patterson's Maximum Ride series. Thoughts? I thought it should have ended with the 3rd book. I can't really give an honest opinion on that. I have not read Maximum Ride in a very long time. So I am very, very far out of the loop. I could not even tell you what the main character's name is. So if I reread them, I would be happy to give my opinions on them. Atlantis Gaming says, any update on Percy Jackson Series 2 return date? Not that I know of. Let me see if I can find anything. Percy Jackson Season 2, if there's any news recently. Obviously been renewed. Checking the wiki. Set to be released in 2025. My guess would be, because the first season aired in the winter of 2023, going into 2024, I would guess that they air it spring of 2025. So that tells me that they're probably filming it, if not now, then very, very soon, and have it out late April, early May would be my best guess at the moment. As far as the current pace of TV often goes, it's typically about 1.5 to 2 years. So my earliest guess would be the end of April. Stinker says, you should post 1 Goosebumps book every couple of days in October. I probably won't get to that this year. There is a lot going on right now with the channel. I can try to shoot for that next year. But and maybe give you guys a Goosebumps book in October, but definitely not 1 per few days. That's not realistic, and I want to make sure you guys know that that I'm not just slighting you. It's just it takes me 2 months to record a 200-page Among the Hidden book because of everything else going on the channel. So I physically cannot do more than 1 Goosebumps book in a month. Looks like I lost the chat for a second. Hopefully my Wi-Fi isn't acting up. Let me know if you guys are losing signal. Sarah W. says, I second reading the Goosebumps book on this channel. I'm not against doing it. I just can't do it at that pace. Diz says, filming started beginning of August, I believe. Okay, so they are already filming, which tells me that's a good sign. That tells me that that April is probably an appropriate date to expect a new season. But I would guess anywhere from April to June as a start date. Eminem Weekly says, thought on the following Percy Jackson casting for Tantalus, Timothy Simons. Let me see if I recognize Timothy Simons. I definitely like Kristen Shaw from Bob's Burgers. That's not what I know Kristen Shaw from. Actually, what do I know Kristen Shaw from? Obviously, her voice is like one of the most iconic voices in voice acting history, which is weird to say. Obviously, Grey Delisle is probably the one that comes to mind, but yeah, Kristen Shaw, very iconic voice. I think she fits really well. As long as they can put her in enough makeup to mask how young she is, I think her voice specifically. I don't know what I did for the Grey Sisters, but when I think about it now, if I were to go back and do the Grey Sisters, I would probably try to do a Kristen Shaw impression. Timothy Simons. Oh, from Veep. Yeah. Oh, I kind of like that. Yeah. So Timothy Simons looks like a younger version of Billy Bob Thornton. If you guys know who Billy Bob Thornton is. And off the top of my head, if I had to pick an actor to play Tantalus, it would have been Billy Bob Thornton. And so, to me, like, that's a very, very good casting. Billy Bob Thornton would be probably a little old now. I want to say he's late 50s, early 60s now. So having kind of a late 30s Tantalus is probably a good casting. But yeah, I think that's a solid casting. Rock and Ruin says, thanks for doing Son of Neptune. Reading is hard for me. When you did Frank's grandma, it was so funny. Buddha's monkey made me laugh so hard. I don't remember the Buddha's monkey thing. I have been criticized for the accents that I use for certain characters, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm very proud of my my Canadian accent for Frank. I know a lot of people love that I put on the accent. I always tell people, like, it's just my natural accent turned up to 11. So I'm a huge Vancouver sports fan. Obviously, I mention all the time, you see the Pacific FC scarf behind me. I'm a big Vancouver Canucks fan. And so I know the Vancouver accent very, very well. And it bums me out that I'm done reading for Frank. Frank doesn't appear in the series anymore. Not that anything happens to him, that's not a spoiler, but he's not in the series anymore. And so the fact that I can't read for Frank anymore really bums me out, because that was the most fun I've ever had using a voice. Yes, Kristen Shaw. That's what I originally know her from, is Gravity Falls. But yeah, she's been in everything. She is a very, very prolific voice actor. Like I said, the only voice actor that comes to mind that I think of as more like iconic than Kristen Shaw is probably Grey Delisle. Let's see here. Atlantis Gaming says, I think we should get a Lego Percy Jackson video. That would be really cool. This is how far out of the loop I am. I don't know are they still making Lego video games? It's been a long time since I saw commercials for any of them. So if they're still making the Lego video game series, then yeah, I think that's completely appropriate. And I think it would do very well. Because the reason that TV shows, films as well, but the reason that TV shows for this series are not going to work very well going into the future is they're all kids. And each book takes place a year after the next one. And so if you're doing a season by season thing, you either have to make a season a year, or you just have to give in to the fact that by the time you get to where the storyline is going to go with the Heroes of Olympus, if you do all 10 seasons of the original Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus series, your actors are going to be in their late 20s by the time they're playing 16-year-olds. Whereas if you're doing a video game, you don't have to worry about that. Excuse me. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. I still haven't gotten all the way through the future of the channel, I think. Because in addition to the daily chapter stuff, like I said, I'm currently working on a Game of Thrones. The first third of that, I'm hoping to have up on Patreon very soon. I'm also working on the next of the side books of Rick Riordan's that I'm working on is Demigods and Magicians. It's the crossover series between Percy Jackson and the King Chronicles. There's 3 short stories in there. I'm done with one of them. The other 2 are about 70 pages long each, so I might have to book out a couple afternoons in the next couple weeks. So I'm hoping to have that up on Patreon when we're done with The Serpent's Shadow. In addition to that, working on a series of unfortunate events, continuing to work on Fire and Blood. And then the other series behind me and in front of me, I have, obviously we're going to try to finish, before next summer, we're going to try to get through all of the Magic Treehouse books and A to Z Mysteries books. I have Artemis Fowl, the second book that I'm working on. Behind me, over my shoulder, continuing my Bible readings in the Book of Mormon. Dune Messiah is back there. Divergent, I'm hoping to have up on the channel starting in the spring. House of Cards, The Sun and the Star. I'm hoping to have that finished fairly soon. Problem is, it's got a lot of spoilers in it, so I don't want to post that before we're done with Trials of Apollo. So that is going to be probably the end of next summer, which is really sad. The Avatar Chronicles series, so right now I have the new one about Roku. Diary of a Wimpy Kid will come out every couple months or so. What else do I got over my other shoulder? Wrong way. Aragon, more Sherlock Holmes stuff. Tale of Despero is my next kind of long-form children's book that I am going to be reading for the channel. We got tangential Harry Potter books with Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Underneath that, I'm trying to look here. Continuing Among the Hidden and the Missing series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. If you guys haven't checked out Found, check it out. It's available over on the other channel as well as on Patreon. Found is a very good book. I'm trying to see if there's anything else there. And then continuing with more Star Wars stuff, City of Ember, that sort of thing. So, Sarah W. says, completely random question. I didn't like the Allegiant movie because of how different it was from the other two. What parts didn't you like? Oh boy, it's been a long time since I saw Allegiant. I can't answer that, honestly. I don't think I've seen Allegiant more than twice, and it's been a very long time. I've seen the other two many times, but for the life of me, I actually can't remember what happens in the Allegiant movie. So, I'll have to come back to that question next week. Eminem Weekly says, I have some ideas for Percy Jackson's casting. I'd like to see Jason Isaacs as Dr. Thorne. Interesting. That would not be my first choice. I see the appeal. Jason Isaacs, in my opinion, would fit better in Percy Jackson. Oh, man. I love Jason Isaacs, don't get me wrong. But the reason I say he's not my first choice is, like, Dr. Thorne has always been a little... I've always portrayed him as over the top. I gave him like a pretty over-the-top French accent. And when it comes to actors who do something like that in a lot of their films, I'm thinking of Sacha Baron Cohen. So, like, for me, Sacha Baron Cohen would be the dream Dr. Thorne casting. But Jason Isaacs, if there's a character that I would love to have Jason Isaacs play in the Riordanverse, it would be Desjardins, who is another French character, a little more toned down. But I think Jason Isaacs would be an excellent Desjardins in the Kane Chronicles if they were to ever make a Kane Chronicle. They did greenlight it and then they canceled it, so that will never see the light of day as long as Netflix has control of that. Or actually, I don't know who had access to. I want to say Netflix had the rights, but they decided not to go forward with the Kane Chronicles show. But Jason Isaacs, I think, would fit Desjardins really, really well. But Dr. Thorne, we'll see. Stinker says, how long do you read daily? Good question. Depends on how much time I have in the evenings. It's typically after 9 o'clock that I am able to find my way down to my studio. So I try to shoot for 2 hours. So if I can knock out 3 to 4 chapters a night of anything, it's a good night. And then I try to get a chapter or two of the Bible out of the way as well, because that's going to be a long project. I have several books finished, but none of the long ones. And so that's, yeah, my Bible project is going to be might be a 5-year project, to be honest with you. But Rick Riordan, we should be done by the end of next calendar year. So that's kind of the pace that we go at. Perkabes says, how far have you gotten in a series of unfortunate events? Chapter 6. I didn't start very long ago, though. So I'm hoping to have the first book out to you guys by November, maybe. Let's shoot for that as a goal. But then... my goal is to do maybe every 2 to 3 months I'll have a book out. I think there's 13 books. So once we get the bad beginning out of the way, then we'll add it to our regular repertoire. Let's see here. Sarah W. and Rock and Ruin both ask, what is the other channel? It's just called Echo Worm. So if you look up the name of this channel, but without the audiobook, it's the same thing, same logo. So that's just where all the long-form content has gone to. You could also find it by going on this channel into any of the playlists. All of those videos are linked to the other channel, so you should be able to find it through there. It's the same name, very easy to find. Stinker says, who do you think will play Nico D'Angelo if they make it to the Titans Curse? I do mention this on my live streams. When it comes to casting like youth roles and child roles, I don't know. I am kind of out of the age where I'm watching stuff that stars young actors and young actresses. And so I don't really know any of the young, like 10 years ago, I could have told you who I wanted to play Nico D'Angelo. Because I was watching Nickelodeon and I was watching Disney Channel and I was watching stuff with young actors in it. Nowadays, I don't really know. Yeah, I think for the sake of representation, you have to have someone who is a member of the community. But I don't know. The interesting thing about Nico D'Angelo is he's Italian, so he should have dark skin and dark features. At least for a Caucasian. But he's also the son of the god of death, and so he's often described as very pasty and very pale. And so there's a wide range of actors that could fit Nico D'Angelo in terms of a physical aspect. But when it comes to the mopiness, I think that's the big thing, is you have to find someone who is extremely, extremely unlikable, while at the same time being able to portray a soft side when it counts. Eminem Weekly says, did you know that Alex Ludwig auditioned to play PETA in the Hunger Games? He was offered the role of Cato instead, so he accepted. Yes, I did know that. So Alex Ludwig or Alex Ludwig, depending on how you want to pronounce it, was a huge Disney child star. I think of films like Race to Witch Mountain alongside Anna Sophia Robb, alongside Josh Hutcherson, who was another huge child star during that time. There are a lot, Jennifer Lawrence was never really a child star, and she was a huge name to sign on to the Hunger Games. And still, the Hunger Games kind of made her career. But everybody else in that cast was a huge child star at the time. So Alexander Ludwig, who played Cato, the girl whose name I can never remember, who played Clove. You might know her from the movie Orphan, which isn't necessarily a child movie, but she was a child star in that film. She was very big at the time. Josh Hutcherson, easily the best known name in that cast prior to the film's release. But yeah, they definitely wanted the gravitas that Josh Hutcherson brought to the role, and he arguably fits the cute, cuddly aspect of PETA, if that makes any sense. Like, that might be a poor description for PETA, but in terms of like Alex Ludwig, is a lot bulkier, a lot more imposing, and so he fits the role of Cato a lot better, and is one of the standout performers in that film. Another star that actually, she wasn't a child star when the movie came out. She kind of got her start in it, is Amandla Stenberg, who has had significant success since the Hunger Games, but she obviously, her breakout role was in that film as Rue. So a fantastic child cast. Whoever the casting director was on the Hunger Games film knocked it out of the park. Elias Quigg says, you changed your hair. I did. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, this is my natural hair color. And my wife convinced me to shave the sides and go with kind of the modern mullet look. I'm not sure how I like the style yet, but I do like the color because it is my natural color, and I wanted to go dark for the winter anyways. So Sarah W says, Austin Butler wanted to play PETA too, but he got turned down. Oh man, I'm trying to imagine that fitting well. I can't see it. I think if you specifically at that time, if you put Austin Butler as PETA, you make it into Hannah Montana, The Hunger Games, if that makes any sense. Like that is kind of Josh Hutcherson was his own thing. Austin Butler was very much I'm the love interest in all your favorite childhood shows kind of thing. And thank goodness, in my opinion, thank goodness he didn't get the role, because he struggled for a long time to find work that was meaningful for him. And out of that, we got his career resurgence. Obviously, we got Elvis, which was the biggest role of his entire career. And now we have that TV, it's not Flyboys, is it? The TV show that he's been in. There's a new motorcycle movie that he stars in. And then obviously the big one nowadays is Dune. He was Fedor Alpha in the new Dune movie. So very, very happy about that one. I forgot Jack Quaid was Marvel. Yeah, I forgot that. And I did say Amandla Stenberg. Yeah. You said Amalda Steinberg. I believe it's pronounced Amandla Stenberg. But yeah, Jack Quaid. So Jack Quaid, you guys probably know, he's kind of the main character, for lack of a better term, in The Boys. He plays, is it Huey is the main character's name. But yeah, Jack Quaid's first like major movie role was as Marvel, who is the District 1. He's the one that kills Rue, and then is subsequently killed by Katniss. But he's the son of Dennis Quaid, who look him up. You guys would recognize Dennis Quaid from something. And then his mother is Meg Ryan, who is another very, very famous actress. So yeah, Hunger Games, I believe, was his first major film role. Oliver Finstead says, when I think of Nico as an adult, I only picture the Sandman from the Netflix show The Sandman. I have not seen The Sandman, so I can't confirm nor deny whether I agree with you. Stinker says, I'm reading Trials of Apollo, The Hidden Oracle, and I love Apollo's POV and how he sees the mortal world. What is your opinion? I love it. I had a blast. I've already recorded the first few chapters just because I wanted to. It's been a long time since I've read Trials of Apollo. And when I was reading the Kane Chronicles, I realized, specifically when I switched over to reading Demigods and Magicians, that my voices for Percy and Carter are fairly similar. And so I in recording that one, I've kind of tried to differentiate the two. And so when it came time for me to start recording Trials of Apollo, I really wanted to get into the cockiness of Apollo. And so to start, like, my voice is very different. I deepen my voice a little bit, give it kind of this grandiose, and then as soon as he's turned into a human and things start going different, then I kind of switch back into my normal American accent narrator voice. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. His interactions with Meg in the second chapter are really, really fun as well. Atlantis Gaming says, do you think you're going to go see Joker 2 when it comes out in October? Yeah, probably. I see a lot of films, so I anticipate going to see Joker. I enjoyed the first one. Elias Quigg says, I really like Jack Quaid. He's very honest about being a Nepo baby despite also being a good actor. Yeah, that was the big reason why, because I remember when they cast him in Hunger Games, he had never really had a major role before. And a lot of people were like, I don't know, it's not a major role, it's Marvel. He doesn't really have any speaking lines. But he only got the role because he's Dennis Quaid's kid kind of thing, and Meg Ryan's kid, and they pulled some strings. But yeah, he's pretty solid. Eminem Weekly says, Austin Butler was also, that's right, I forgot that, was also in a supporting role in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was there before Elvis. Yes, I remember that. Side tangent. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the movie that I have seen in theaters the most. I want to say I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 6 times. And so, yes, I'm very familiar with that movie. I've seen it more than 10 times now, but I saw it 6 times in theaters. I liked it that much. Sarah W. says, I really want to see Joker 2. Folie à deux, which means two people that share the same delusion. Yes. It's a musical, which will be interesting. I don't know if Joaquin Phoenix can sing. So, we'll see. I'm caught up in the chat. Feel free to keep asking questions. I do have more time if you guys want. Let's see here. Rock and Ruin says, autocorrect betrayed me. I subbed to the other channel. Have a good stream. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Atlantis Gaming says, what is your top 5 favorite books turned into movies? If what you mean by that is my favorite film adaptations of books, because, like, I really like Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, so I could give you that because I like that book, but I wouldn't say that the film is very good, even though it is one of my favorite films, just for personal reasons. But in terms of film adaptations of books, I would say Dune 1, Dune 2, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, because the film is very, very good, and the book, in my opinion, is not. Let's see what else. Films. Let's make it 6 and say Lord of the Rings 1, 2, and 3. Last Quig says, do you like Tarantino movies in general or just Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Depends on the film. There are some that, like, I don't enjoy Inglourious Bastards as much as maybe other people do. I've, you guys are going to grill me for this one. I have never clicked with Pulp Fiction the way most people do. And, like, a lot of his earlier stuff, I don't click with as much as most, like, Tarantino stans do. I have a buddy who's a huge Tarantino fan. Alex, if you're watching this, I know. He loves Pulp Fiction. He can quote the movie in his sleep. Kill Bill, he loves it. I've never clicked with early Tarantino. I love Django. I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I don't know. It depends on the subject material. I don't know. Like, I say that having said I like Django, so I don't know what that says about me. But I really like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood setting specifically, and the way that he uses. My favorite thing about the film is the way he uses the murder of Sharon Tate as foreshadowing, or as a use of tension. Like, he uses the Manson murders to cause tension in what is otherwise a film that lacks significant tension, and I think that's phenomenal. I think the writing of that film is fantastic. I think the directing is fantastic, and I think the performances are out of this world. Like, the cast, every single one of them, is on their A game. Sarah W says, "What's the other channel name again?" It's just Echo Wirm. So this one's called Echo Wirm Audiobooks. The other one is just called Echo Wirm. Stinker says, "I love Leo. He's basically the maniac of the Argo 2." Yeah, Leo is my favorite POV character. I forgot to say Catching Fire. Yeah, I love Catching Fire. Catching Fire is, in my opinion, easily the best of the Hunger Games films. Although I will say, in terms of... So I mentioned Harry Potter and the Order. There are a lot of films that do very well adaptations from their original counterparts. But I mentioned Order of the Phoenix. The book I don't like. The film I do like. And most people would agree that the film is actually better than the book in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say that the film is better than the book, but I think in terms of the difference in quality between the book version and the film version in any of the Hunger Games films, I think Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the film is very, very good. I think Catching Fire is still a better film, but I think Catching Fire, the book, is also a lot better than the book Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I think the film elevates Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes beyond where it already is. I've mentioned before, like, Catching Fire is both book and film on the top of my list. My second favorite film in the series is actually Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, whereas it's my third favorite book, and then Hunger Games is flipped like that, and then Mockingjay for me is at the bottom of both lists. 2 over 1. Let's see here. Elias Quigg says, "My personal favorite book to movie is The Green Mile." Very good book, very good movie. I would completely agree. I often forget about adult books that are turned into, or at least non-series books that are turned into films. But yeah, Stephen King has a lot of good adaptations. I personally enjoy Kubrick's Shining. I know most people don't enjoy Kubrick's Shining in terms of its relation to the book. I would say if there's a King adaptation that elevates the book more than where the book is, it's The Mist. And I am not like, that's not an original take. Most people enjoy The Mist film more than they enjoy the book because of the ending. They changed the ending. Atlantis Gaming says, "I recently rewatched the Maze Runner movie." I haven't seen it in a long time, but I have been reading through the Maze Runner. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. It is behind me, which is another series I'm hoping to get to in the spring, if I didn't mention that already. I do apologize if you guys hear banging. There is a car outside my house right now that is blasting its bass. Stinker says, "My favorite book to movie is Diary of a Wimpy Kid." I know it's a little basic one. Yeah, I do enjoy the Diary of a Wimpy Kid films. I'm a big Devin Bostic fan. I thought he was great in... He's been great in a lot of stuff. I'm a fan of The 100 TV series. He was in that. Plays a very different character than Roderick. But yeah, Devin Bostic is really solid in the role of Roderick, which is where we got the "Not My Roderick" meme from. Sarah W says, are you going to watch Sunrise on the Reaping in theaters? Probably. I didn't know that they had even cast it yet. I know that they are releasing the book and then putting a film into production. But I didn't actually know that if they've gone it. Let me check real quick. Sunrise on the Reaping film. It has a release date, which I knew. But it's not expected to be released until Thanksgiving of 2026, which tells me that they're not going to start production on the film until after the book comes out, which is what I expected. So yes, I will see it, but it is over 2 years away. So yeah, we'll see what I'm doing in 2 years. Eminem Weekly says, some of the reviews for Magnus Chase have compared Riordan's sense of humor in those books to that of Mel Brooks. I've never heard that before. That's interesting. I disagree with that, as Mel Brooks' humor is considered a very high bar. Yeah, so I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. I have older parents for my age, and so I grew up with all of the Mel Brooks films, and obviously, like, the first one I was exposed to was Spaceballs. Robin Hood Men in Tights is another one. You guys are probably familiar with Young Frankenstein or History of the World Part 1. And then, of course, the infamous one that most people would say probably don't watch till you're older and probably isn't appropriate to watch nowadays, but one that my brother can quite literally quote end to end is Blazing Saddles. But yeah, in terms of Rick Riordan's humor, comparing it to Mel Brooks, I would say there's maybe influences in it, but honestly, if anything, I would say Rick Riordan's biggest influence, at least from my perspective, when it comes to the way that he writes his comedy, is very Monty Python. Like, very much Monty Python sketch. But yeah, like, I can see influence from Mel Brooks, but I think comparing the two is a bit of a stretch. Like you said, Mel Brooks is a very high bar, significantly more inappropriate than Rick Riordan's humor. Rick Riordan very rarely goes past the PG mark. There's a joke in, I think, The Throne of Fire, where Carter is pretty heavily staring at the breasts of another character, and they don't describe it. Like, what I'm trying to say is Carter is basically ogling this woman, and Rick doesn't write it as that, but it's implied that. And so Rick is very much a PG version of Mel Brooks, if there was one. Let's see here. Sarah W says, I heard they're making a new Maze Runner movie. I will have to check that one out. I wish they would have continued the series longer than they did, because I really enjoy the Maze Runner prequels. The books, at least. Elias Quigg says, The Perks of Being a Wallflower was also a great book and movie. Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoy the book. Obviously, the film has not necessarily aged well for obvious reasons. But when it came out, it was very good. And like, no fault of the film at all. And the book is also very, very good. So yes, I completely agree with you. Like I said, I if it's not part of a series, I often forget to include that when you guys ask me questions like that. Sarah W says, Devin Bostic is really good at comedic acting. Yeah, his role in The 100, if you guys have never seen The 100, it's a book that's on my list to read. But it was a CW show. I think you can find it on Netflix now. It's got 7 seasons. It should have stopped after 4 seasons. But Devin Bostic plays basically the nerdy character of the group, who is also like a secret stoner kind of thing. And so he brings like a nerdy vibe to the Roderick character that is very, very fun. But yeah, he's very good at comedic acting. Stinker says, Nico is the scariest demigod to fight. Just look at the Blood of Olympus chapter 31, what he did to Bryce. I wouldn't go as far as calling him the scariest demigod to fight. I would say his potential to be is up there. I would say Luke Castellan, honestly, is probably the scariest, in my opinion. I think I don't think your opinion is wrong, but I wouldn't agree that Nico would be the scariest to fight. I think he has the potential to be, absolutely. Atlantis Gaming says, who is your favorite actor right now? Good question. 2 months ago, I could have told you who my favorite actor was, but Donald Sutherland died. So nowadays, who is my favorite actor? Helen Mirren. But if we're going specifically male actors, Oh, that's a really good question. That is a really good question. I like Austin Butler a lot. Oh, man, I do have an answer. You guys keep asking questions. I'm going to sit here in silence while I really think about that because I want to give you an honest answer to that. My favorite actor right now. I don't know. I'm a huge Christian Bale fan. Like if you guys have never seen the movie Vice, I really, like that movie made me reappreciate Christian Bale's career. Like I think he's fantastic in that. I think Hugh Jackman is pretty solid, but he's kind of typecast. When it comes to like method acting, yeah, I don't know. I like Heath Ledger would be up there. Most of my favorite actors of all time are now deceased, which is a disappointment. But yeah, Donald Sutherland is my favorite actor of all time, and I would say my current favorite actor living is probably Christian Bale. Eminem Weekly says Mel Brooks did a miniseries sequel series called History of the World Part 2 on Hulu, which has Nick Kroll, Ike Barinholtz, Wanda Sykes the main characters. Brooks is the lead writer narrator. Yeah. So I will say this. I enjoyed History of the World Part 2. Mel Brooks is in his 90s. And when they call him the lead writer, I am hesitant because I understand that comedy evolves, and obviously his comedy now is going to be very different. But when I watched History of the World Part 2, it still had his kind of flair in it. But to me, it felt like an SNL writer was writing a Mel Brooks skit, if that makes any sense. I still enjoyed it, but I did not think it was up to Mel Brooks' par, if that makes any sense. And it comes down to the fact, like I said, he's 90 years old. So, yes, he was attached to the project. I'm curious how much lead writing he actually did for the series. Elias Quake says, Leo would scare me to fight. Imagine someone just lights themselves on fire and starts quipping like Spider. Yeah, if I had to go one-on-one, the last one I would choose... Well, okay, I wouldn't choose Percy, I wouldn't choose Jason, I wouldn't choose Leo, I would probably choose Frank. Until I realized what he could do. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, all of these characters... the easiest characters to fight is probably Piper. And... yeah, we've talked about Piper before. Atlantis Gaming says, I like Jack Black at the moment. Yeah, good luck with that Minecraft film coming out. Cora XOXO says, when is Heroes of Olympus Part 2 coming out? Sunday morning. I believe 11 o'clock Eastern. The full version will start airing. And so that, I want to say it's like a 5-hour video. It's a lot shorter than I expected it to be. It might even be 4 hours. And so that'll air as a premiere on the other channel, starting at, like I said, 11 o'clock Eastern on Sunday morning. And then we'll do Chalice of the Gods the next day, and then Kane Chronicles will start daily chapters the following day. Stinker says, I want to see a book about Luke, Talia, and Annabeth on their journey to Camp Half-Blood with Grover. Well, I can give you part of that. If you go in the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles folder, and you find the book titled The Demigod Diaries. It's got a green cover on it. The first or so of those stories is called The Diary of Luke Castellan, and basically is a short story about Luke and Talia finding Annabeth. So Grover's not in it yet. Annabeth still hasn't really established herself as part of their group, but if you want a story about Luke and Talia, that is kind of the only option you have outside of the main series. It's called The Diary of Luke Castellan, and I think it's the first main story in the Demigod Diaries. Oliver Finstead says, also sad that James Earl Jones died. Yeah, he just died earlier this week. Yeah, that he was a lot older than I thought he was. But yeah, Field of Dreams, Lion King, James Earl Jones, iconic voice. Zayden says, is this your job or what do you do for work? No, this is definitely not my main job. I don't make any money off of YouTube. I am a professional musician and music coordinator. So, Eminem Weekly asks, have you seen History of the World Part 2? I have, yeah. What are your favorite sketches in it? What are your favorite performances in it? It's been a while. I've only seen it through once. It came out recently enough where I have not had a chance to go back and rewatch it. And the one skit that stands out to me is it Danny DeVito? Is he the Tsar? It's about Rasputin and the Russian royal family. For whatever reason, that's the one that stands out to me. I'm also thinking of the Civil War skit. And those are, like, of the ones that I can think of, those are the ones that really stand out to me that I can remember. But, yeah. People keep asking when Silverchair is going to be on the channel. As soon as Dune's done. So, 2 weeks. I want to say either Saturday or Sunday. Not this weekend, but the following. Silverchair will start. It's already up on Patreon if you guys have that ability. But, yeah, it'll be up for free starting next weekend. And we'll go chapter a day, and then we'll do Hunger Games, and then we'll go back and finish Narnia with The Last Battle. It's been a long time since I've read The Last Battle. It's very, very biblical if you know how to read through the metaphor. It's definitely a Narnian retelling of the Book of Revelation, which for me as a Christian is very interesting to read a different perspective or a different retelling of that. Are you going to do the rest of the Song of Ice and Fire series after it's done? Yeah. So Game of Thrones, I don't know when it's going. I do have a plan. This is 3 years down the road. I do have a plan to, if we haven't somehow finished Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire series outside of the daily chapters, it will become a daily chapter book in about 2 to 3 years. So I'm hoping to get through this one as soon as I can and then move on to Clash of Kings. But they are very, very long books. Danny DeVito played the Romanov family patriarch, and yeah. I'm thinking the Russian Revolution sketch. Yeah, that one is probably my favorite if I had to pick one. Otherwise, like, we are over halfway through Magic Tree House. I'm looking here. I want to say we have about less than 20 of those books left, which is fantastic. There are like 70 of them. So the fact that we're this far is really, really awesome. Stinker says, are you reading all the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series? Because I've been seeing them pop up on the second channel. I'm going to at least read the first 6. Beyond the first 6, it depends if they're getting traction on the channel. If people, like, if I record the 6th one and in 2 months' time it has less than 100 views, then I probably won't do the 7th, or at least I won't do it at a consistent pace. Like, I'll put it pretty far in the back of my list. It all depends on what people are interested in listening to, because I would much rather focus on other series. You see, obviously, all the different series behind me that I'd like to get to. If sequels to the first books in these series are not getting traction on the channel, then if it's a series that has 25 books, I don't really see a reason to try to finish all of those. That's kind of why I'm hesitant to start the 39 Clues series, because a lot of you have asked me to do them, but if I'm down to like the 4th book and I'm putting all my time into 39 Clues and I'm only getting like 50 views on these videos, whereas I could be doing, for example, the Kane Chronicles faster, where we're getting like thousands of views. I would much rather be doing that, where we're pulling people into the channel and doing things that more people want to engage with the channel in, if that makes any sense. Because at that point, the longer a series goes on, the less I enjoy it, if that makes any sense. For example, like Artemis Fowl, I will definitely do the second one, but beyond that, I am not entirely sure. So we'll see. Eminem Weekly says, did you know that a Spaceballs sequel is coming? Josh Gad is involved as a screenwriter and lead actor, while Mel Brooks is the main producer. I did not know that was in production. I've been waiting for Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, since I was old enough to remember that movie. But I did not know that they had finally greenlit it. I know they've been talking about it for years, and I know that they actually 10 years ago started pushing for it, but I had not heard that. Interesting. Trying to see if I missed any questions. Feel free to keep asking questions if you guys have them. I'll probably go for about 15 more minutes here. What are some other series that you haven't started yet that you really want to read on the channel? Good question. Because like I said, and like you see behind me, there are a lot of series that I've started, but that I probably won't finish or get out to you guys on the channel for a very long time. And so the ones that I'm thinking, like I haven't started The Witcher yet. I have a lot of Polish listeners. Anya Uchek, like every time she's in the chat, asks when I'm doing The Witcher. I haven't started it yet, and I really want to, but I haven't had time, and that's a really dumb excuse, I know. I'm waiting till this pile behind me gets down a little bit, which should happen by the spring, in which case then I will start pushing some of those other series. So The Witcher is one. I'm trying to think of some other ones here. Battlefield Earth I've been thinking of reading. That's an L. Ron Hubbard book. What else here? Twilight. My wife is desperate for me to start reading Twilight, and I have been putting it off as long as possible. Sarah W. says, I suggest spacing out books if they're in a long series, like only doing a few books in a long series a year so you get the chance to do others. Yeah, so for example, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the Shadow Children, my Star Wars books, I typically only release like one every 2 months. And so that gives me time to like space it out and add more chapters to these other books, because these books behind me, very oftentimes I will only get a chapter done a month. And so like prioritizing what's in front of you, guys can't see the pile in front of me. This is my chapter a day pile. That's how much I am trying to get to every day. I don't often get to all of them every day, and so it just cycles through the pile. But that is kind of like, there's a lot of books and I just don't have time to read them. So I do try to space them out. That way I don't wear myself out or wear you guys out with just things constantly uploading, that sort of thing. Stinker says, yeah, you're right. There's barely any Kane Chronicles audiobooks. That'll get a lot of attention. Yeah, you guys have been asking for it for a while. I know a lot of people want Trials of Apollo first. I want to get Kane Chronicles out of the way. That way we're not sitting on it for too long. And I've already recorded them. So on Patreon, we've been doing it for 3 months now. And we're going to be done with Kane Chronicles in a month. And so that's 3 books just out of the way. Now we can get on to Trials of Apollo. So I'm very excited to get Trials of Apollo to you guys, because I know you guys have been asking for them, and I'm desperate to get through the spoiler. I am desperate to get through the part of the book that I will not let you guys talk about in the comments. Eminem Weekly says, I'm tapping out. See you in the next live stream. Well, thank you very much for being here. I will hopefully see you in 2 weeks. I'll just talk briefly on what else we got going on. I mentioned the other channel, so all of the full form audio content, you can still find it on this channel. You just got to look in the playlists, and it will send you to another channel, which is called Echo Wirm, just on its own. If there's stuff you can't find, obviously our Harry Potter stuff isn't on YouTube. Our Spiderwick Chronicle stuff isn't on YouTube. Our Game of Thrones type content is not on YouTube. You can find all of that over on Patreon and Vimeo. It's still available for free most of the time. And so if you just search patreon.com/EchoWirm, you can find it there. Or if you go to vimeo.com and search for EchoWirm, of course, worm with an I, then you should be able to find a very similar setup to what we have here on YouTube, with all the stuff that we can't put on YouTube for copyright purposes. So check those out. Separate channels, that sort of thing. We also have merch. I mention this every live stream, but my wife was so nice to make this I Ate the Kitchen Table shirt. If you guys don't know the story, in the Sea of Monsters, I make a blunder that I kept in and did not edit out. And I forgot to say that I ate at the kitchen table, but here in the original Percy Jackson font with a little trident underneath is my most famous blunder. You guys can get it as a t-shirt for just $19.99. I think the most expensive of these options is the pullover hoodie, which I want to say is like 30 or 35 bucks, American, obviously. But you guys can probably convert that to your local currency if you need to. I want to say it ships everywhere in the world. It may only be the English-speaking world, but I'm sure that it ships to England and Australia as well. but that is over on Bonfire. There's a link in the description below this. I mentioned the podcast. That is weekly. You guys can search for that on Apple, on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find the Echo Wirm Echo Chamber podcast. We have 2 episodes that are aired, and we will continue that bi-weekly. We will do a live stream with it next Thursday as well, talking about the intro chapters to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, where Harry is now entering into the wizarding world. I have links to my music down below. I have links to Patreon, Vimeo. Join the Discord if you haven't already. What we did in the chat here, you can continue this over on Discord. Obviously, it's for free, so click the link. It should be a permanent link. If for whatever reason it doesn't work for you, let me know in the comment section below, and I will get you a link that does work. But that is just a place where we can continue these conversations when I'm not actively on camera. So thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it. See you next week for our podcast live, or if you can't make it until the next live stream question, you are absolutely more than welcome